Yeah, this vlog here is entitled Tariq-Ibn-Ziyad, a brief run through. Now, as far as this guy, he's known for being the first person of Islamic persuasion to invade Spain. And this occurred in 711 AD. He first touched down exactly April the 26th, I believe. But there's like a little slight history leading up into this point, which also involves the Byzantines. As far as like Tariq-Ibn-Ziyad, he was just merely a commander. The governor of Africa, which consisted of Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya at the time, was a guy by the name of Musa ibn Nusayr. Tariq ibn Ziyad was just a commander under him at the time. Now, there was an ongoing war, I guess you could call it war in this sense, for like land grabs at this point. And as far as like the Byzantinians, Tangier of Morocco was a province of theirs at that point. So as far as like the Umayyad Caliphate from the east, the head of that caliphate was a guy named Caliph, right? They had conquered through North Africa, and they were trying to take Tangier. It really started in 710 AD. They were successful in 711 AD. And it was one of the Byzantinians' strongest holds at the time. Holds or posts at the time. And they were successful in taking it. After that, the Byzantinians just basically abandoned any type of territory that they had in North Africa at that point. Now, as far as the northeast of that, in a place called Ceuta, there was a guy by the name of Julian who was under the Byzantinians at this point. But when they successfully took, actually it wasn't in 711 when they took Tangier, it was in 709. Let me make sure I make that correction in case I said 711. It was in 709 when they took it. But as far as at that point, when the Romans, or not the Romans, but the Byzantinians abandoned North Africa, basically, a guy by the name of Julian was under the Byzantinians by that point. But he was they call it a count of Ceuta, but basically like a governing official just in Ceuta itself. Based on what I read, it didn't seem like Ceuta was really that strong of a territory for the Romans. But when that happened in 709, this guy Julian basically went rogue. In other words, and when he went rogue, he ended up establishing some type, like he affiliated himself with the Visigoths at that point. Now, the Visigoths, they were ruling in Spain at this point, and they had ruled in Spain since 418 AD. All right, keep that in mind. That's very fucking important. So sometime between, I'm gonna mention this because it's still contextual. Sometime between 709 and 711 AD, Julian ended up falling off with the Visigoths because he had a daughter by the name of Florinda La Sava. The last name is Cava. I believe that's how you pronounce it, Sava. And based on what I read, as a part of tradition and custom, he had sent his daughter there to the Visigoths. The king of the Visigoths at the point was a guy named Roderick. He sent his daughter there to be educated by him. This guy, Roderick, ended up taking advantage of her and ended up raping her. Now, this is coming from like different sources based on what I read. So there are like other explanations to how the Islamists, for example, in the province of Africa, what facilitated them going into Spain and then invading it. But this is like, as far as this guy Julian and what took place with his daughter, this is like one of the interpretations that I read, right? So after that happened, this guy Julian got pissed off, and so he decided to betray the Visigoths at that point. Again, this happened sometime between 709 and 711 AD. When that happened, he somehow got in contact with Tariq-Ibn-Ziyad. By this point, the governor of Africa had left, and he went to a place called Quayrawan, which is also in Tunisia. So he didn't leave the region per se, but he had left. And this guy Julian communicated to Tariq Ibn Ziyad that he could help him get into Spain and invade it or whatnot, because he himself, as far as Julian, he had like a lot of resources. Like he had a lot of merchant ships, and as far as in Spain, in southern Spain, he had a lot of force that was built there, so he'll be able to get them set up easily or whatnot. Tariq Ibn Ziyad agreed. Before he went further with that action, there's another guy who ended up later on participating physically in the invasion. His name is Muqith al-Rumi. He was initially a messenger for Musa ibn Nusayr. Nusayr is spelled Nusayr. So Tariq sent that guy to the east to communicate to Al-Walid what was going on, like basically the lick that he came across and what they were planning to do. He eventually got the okay to go ahead. So April 26th, they left. Well, actually, they left and they landed in Spain April 26th, because the Gibraltar Strait, for example, is only like 7 miles from southern Spain. So I don't think it took days for them to make it there. When they touched down, this is another piece that I read, by the way. It is claimed that he gave, as far as Tariq Ibn Ziyad, he gave his man like a inspirational speech. He told them to burn the ships after they all fully landed, just so they could, to kind of like to encourage more bravery from them. Like it was a all or nothing type of mission or whatever. And as far as like the totality of men that he had with him, it was about like 7,000. So by the time they made it to Roderick, for example, also, based on what I read, Roderick supposedly had 100,000. But the same fucking article said that more than likely that's not the case, and I agree with that, because it's unrealistic. Because when the battle finally ended, as far as like the casualties on the side of the Islamists under Tariq, they suffered like 3,000 casualties out of 7,000 men. So nobody knows exactly how many men that Roderick had, but when he finally met up against his forces, this is another thing that I read. It is like the battle itself is called the Battle of Guadalete, but the exact location is unknown. The only hint is that it was somewhere near a body of water. And the battle took place July 19th. This guy was greatly defeated. Him and his forces ended up running further, or being pushed further north. After that, Tariq Ibn Ziyad divided his forces into like 4 different divisions. And the guy that I mentioned, the messenger, Abdallah al-Rumi. No, not Abdallah al-Rumi, I'm sorry. But Muqith al-Rumi, he was put as the head of one of those forces that ended up conquering, Cordoba, Granada, and then other places that wasn't specified. As far as Toledo itself, because the Visigoths had control over Toledo as well, Tariq Ibn Ziyad and his man took that as well. So after that occurred, fighting continued, and the Visigoths were pushed further and further north. Also, another fact is that as far as like his forces, even though the number is not known, the Visigoth king that existed prior to Roderick was a guy by the name of what was his name? Wittizah, I believe it, Wittizah, and he had already been killed because let me see, he was ruling from like 694 up until between 702 and 703. But as far as Roderick hits himself, because that guy with his he ruled with his father for a certain period, and I believe it was more than likely up until 702 and 703, because he wasn't deposed by Roderick until 711 AD. But as far as like that guy, his sons were put ahead of some of the forces that were under the Visigoths, who were fighting against Tariq-Ibn-Ziyad, but they still were unsuccessful. So as far as like when Cordoba and Granada was taken, and other places as well, they were pushed further north. Then there was another place called Castilla. Actually, it was called Guadalajara, Jara. So I'm assuming it's Hara, like Jose, for example. But that was in a place in the region today called Castilla La Mancha. It's not all the way in the north of Spain. It's almost like in central Spain and whatnot. But that city was taken, and then another one called Astorga. Now that is actually in Leon, Spain. That's all the way to the north, in the northern portion of Spain. That was finally taken as well. Now, by this point, as far as like the governor himself of Africa, that's when he came back from Rawan. When he came back from Rawan, that's when he decided to plan another invasion, and he assembled about 12,000 men. Now, keep in mind, at this point, based on what I read, they said like 2/3 of Spain was conquered. So as far as like the Visigoths, they were turned into that point into a rump state. Now, at the outstarts of this, they did rule vast portions of Spain also. Like some of the places that was mentioned when I was reading this is like Portugal, parts of Portugal. What was it? A province called Narbonnenses, which when you look at the map, it's like a significant portion of fucking Western France. It's like Western France, Southern France, part of the Pyrenees Mountains, and Eastern, not Western France, I'm sorry. Eastern France, Southern France, the Pyrenees Mountains, more so like the eastern portion of it, and then northeastern Spain. Because in northeastern Spain, there's a place called Andorra, right? It's a country today. But that region or that area was also a part of this province of Narbonnenses or whatever. So it was like a vast expanse of land that was a part of this province or whatever. And also another place called Septimania or Septimania. It was also located in southern France as well. So by the time Musa ibn Nusayr came back, that's pretty much where the Visigoths were at. So they had lost all their other territories except for like that region that I just named. So at this point, they were a rump state, like a spider whose legs had been cut off. So when he planned his second raid and he assembled 12,000 men, they eventually followed through. Now, the year that he actually came back was in 712 AD. 2 years after that, he himself and Tariq-Ibn-Ziyad was ordered by Al-Walid to go to Damascus, and that's where both of them remain until the end of their lives. As far as Tariq-Ibn-Ziyad, he died in 720 AD. As far as Musa ibn Nusayr, he died in 717 AD. So going back to this period, a couple of years before that, when he assembled 12,000 men, sometime between that time period, 712 up until 714, is